in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says that matter and spirit are so opposite that unless you assume a gradation, you cannot even logically prove that they are one, or that one can evolve into the other. And this is the 7 stages, the 7 gradations of matter, life, mind, supermind, and Satchidananda. Nobody can take it away from you, and it is your own inner journey, and nobody needs to know a thing about it. Because outwardly, you are doing all those things you were doing before. It's just that inwardly, the pivot has changed. Something has changed. So when guests would come, they would bring a lot of things, and she would ask the kids to choose. So there would be chocolates and turtles and, those metal turtles and so on. And most of the kids would choose chocolate. And then she would say, don't you remember that turtle represents immortality? So even your choice of your gift has to be aligned with what you want to be in your future. The first memory I had of an existential crisis was maybe when I was 6 years old, studying in class 1, and I saw that most of what my uncles and aunts and grandparents did was to take birth, then you study, take up a job, get married, have children, get them married, and then you die finally. There was no purpose in it, I thought. And the brain of a little 6-year-old used to think all day long that how come this cannot be life? And I was born in a Jain family, and we had Jain monks visiting us. And when I asked them, what is the purpose of your life? They said, we are here to find God. And it seemed to me more interesting than what my uncles and grandparents were doing. But then they were wearing white robes, and I asked them if they could sing and pursue dance, and they said no, that's additional karma, and we are here to do only minimum stuff what is needed for the body. So though it was more interesting than what my uncles were doing, but how could I give up? Even as a 6-year-old, I was very much interested in all the arts and sciences and maths and yoga and doing stuff. So that wasn't appealing to me either. Otherwise, I would have packed my bags and gone off with them that very time. And this is how 10 years passed. And I lived almost like a schizophrenic. I was a topper in my school and college, in school, as an all-rounder, etc. And on the other hand, I knew all this would be over once I die. So this is what reached its climatic, problematic position when, at the age of 16, I couldn't take it anymore. And that's when somehow the hand of the divine brought me to Sri Aurobindo Ashram as a 16-year-old to the youth camp at Sri Aurobindo Society in Pondicherry. And that was for me the turning point of my life. For the first time, there was a philosopher, and there were many talks in that youth camp, like this Shakti Kumbh here. And those days we had very senior sadhaks who would come and talk to us. And the beautiful vision of Sri Aurobindo, that you could dance and sing and write and do all of that, and yet live a meaningful life in pursuit of divine and spirituality. So for the first time, somehow in my psyche, matter and spirit had come together as one. And ever since, my life has been an exploration of how these two can be combined, and that is what I will dwell on today. So both these concepts of matter and spirit have been the topic of discovery from times immemorial. Ultimately, it is the pursuit of what is reality, what is truth. And even what we call science and spirituality, which may seem to be very opposite, but both are seeking the truth, the reality. The means are different. Science tries to discover it objectively, experimentally, through the senses, outwardly. The senses go out, collect data, and objectively try to understand reality. And spirituality tries to understand it subjectively by going within, because there are worlds, universes, even within ourselves. And long before telescopes and microscopes were discovered, the speed of light, etc., was already calculated by our rishis. And whatever appears to be so opposite, and it does, right? Matter is here and now. It is in space, in time. It is temporal, it is ephemeral, it is phenomenal. Everything that is born dies. Everything that is there changes. And that is matter. And on the other hand is the spirit, which is eternal, universal, always there as a backdrop to everything that we do. And not just science, modern science and spirituality, but even within the darshanas. In India, we have 9 darshanas. The Charvaka system of materialism is quite different from the Advaita or Uttara and Purva Mimamsa, the Vedantic and the Vedic tradition, right? The Charvaka believes in only what the senses can perceive, materialism. So even the 9 darshanas of India have tried to straddle this entire gamut between matter and spirit. Even within Vedanta, we have Madhavacharya's Dvaita, which says that matter and spirit are 2 separate entities and can never become one. And we have Advaita of Shankaracharya, which says that Brahman Satya and Jagat Mithya, which says that there aren't 2 entities. There is only one entity, the Brahman, and all this is illusion. It is Mithya. To Vishisht Advaita of Ramanujacharya, which acknowledges both and says that this too is Brahman. So even Vedanta, in Vedanta we have right from Dvaita to Vishisht Advaita to Advaita. So this is not a very easy topic, because our day-to-day experience of reality is these two. On one hand, there is a reality that we feel hungry, we need to work, we need to exercise. There is this body, and we have emotions, we have this mind. And once this is taken care of, that's not enough. When material things are taken care of, that's when we start seeking purpose, a deeper sense of doing something, transcending it all, and spirituality. So most often, we kind of segregate the two. We kind of manage this, so it depends on the proportion that we have. Some of us are more involved in this, taking care of our life needs and materiality, and have time for the Sunday church or morning and evening aarti. Or some of us have more of this spirituality and less of, like the monks, the Jain monks I was talking to you about, they have minimized their actions in the world. It's only asking for food, alms, that's what the Gita also says. That you minimize your action, that's one way. Just whatever minimum is needed, and do not indulge in action. And yet, be it the Vedic worldview, which was the grand synthesis of matter and spirit, or the vision of the Gita, where the first chapter opens with Arjuna being asked by Krishna to take up the arms and to fight in the battle. There cannot be an action more horrific than killing somebody, and that can also be spiritual. To now integral yoga, where there's another grand synthesis which has synthesized matter and spirit. So there's a beautiful story of creation which the mother had said, for those of you who are new to the mother. The story of creation. We have several stories of creation, and this one is something she used to tell the children of the ashram, that when the Supreme decided to become another, earlier there was just the Supreme himself, and he wanted to experience himself and manifest himself. And that is when he created out of his being, his creative power, the Shakti, 4 supreme beings. One was consciousness in light, the second was Ananda, the third was life, Sat, and love. And they went on to create this world, which was to be a world of joy and freedom. But these 4 supreme beings had their own ideas of how this world had to be created. And instead of the earlier status where they were one and working together, when they became 4 separate beings, they became their opposites. So consciousness in light became ignorance and darkness, and Ananda or bliss became suffering, love became hatred, and life or Sat became death. And that is what we call the creation that is there now. The opposite of Satchidananda and Supermind, when they became separate and became opposite of themselves. And the matter that was created was flying in all directions. It had become opposite of the Samam Brahman of Satchidananda, and there was chaos. And this has been brought out in several Upanishads also. And that is when these 4 supreme beings ran to the mother and said, help us, the situation is beyond us. And that's when the mother sent out from herself and from the Purushottama, from the Supreme, the spark of the divine love. And that spark of the divine love is what is the power of unity. And that began to coagulate matter, to bring matter together and become the world as it is. And this Agni, this spark of the divine is Agni, the first avatar that started the ascent, the evolution. And when the 4 beings fell to their opposites, that was involution, the creation of this world. And what they became was opposite of what they started from. So matter and spirit became opposite. But because the spark of the spirit was put there to bring it under control, this spark then began its journey upwards of evolution, we know, from Sri Aurobindo's theory of evolution, which is different from Darwin's theory. Darwin's is more of evolution of forms, but Sri Aurobindo's is evolution of consciousness, which assumes the forms that is required to manifest and express that consciousness. That's the fundamental difference. So from matter, slowly life evolved, and then mind evolved. And mind, Sri Aurobindo says, which is best manifested by human beings, is not the final, ultimate step in evolution. Otherwise, world would not be in such a chaotic state as it is. So we have to evolve into the next level, which he calls the supermind. And that is Sri Aurobindo's contribution to the spiritual history of the world, and we'll touch some of it again. Because when in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says that matter and spirit are so opposite that unless you assume a gradation, you cannot even logically prove that they are one, or that one can evolve into the other. And this is the 7 stages, the 7 gradations of matter, life, mind, supermind, and Satchidananda. This is the 7 stages which connect the matter to the spirit through these gradations. So logically, there are many frameworks to prove how matter and spirit are one. we have the Mahavakyas. Mahavakyas of Sanskrit are the great sayings uh, which establish this. For instance, in the Rig Veda, we have in the Aitareya Upanishad, it says Prajnana Brahman. Prajnana Brahman means consciousness is Brahman. So all that we are right now, ma'am was speaking in the morning, that we are conscious as we are. Okay? Animals are also conscious at their own level. They may be guided by instinct. We are guided by the reason, but we are conscious. Even a stone is conscious because it has, we know now through quantum physics that it has atoms and this whirling around. It has its own level of consciousness. So, Prajnana Brahman means everything that is conscious is Brahman. And these were not Mahavakyas, were not some clever, logical utterances or some things by the rishis. These were experiential. This was something they had seen or felt or heard, drishti or seeing it. And that's when they had composed these. So Prajnana Brahman is 10,000 years ago, Rig Veda. And then we have in the Chandogya Upanishad of Samaveda, one of the biggest Mahavakyas of all times is Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. So that is the Brahman and thou is you, we all are. We are Brahman, you are Brahman. So again establishing how matter and spirit are one. Again, I think in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad of Yajurveda, it says, Aham Brahmasmi. I am the Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. This is a huge, profound Mahavakya. There are several others. For instance, there is I am Atma Brahman also. In the Isha Upanishad, it says Vidya and Avidya. There are two concepts. That andham tama gamishyanti ye vidyam upasate. They go to darkness who worship avidya, ignorance, but they go to greater darkness who worship knowledge. It's very counterintuitive, isn't it? So what does it mean? By vidya and avidya is meant, avidya is multiplicity. The knowledge of multiplicity. Avidya is ignorance, where we see everything as separate and distinct. That's how we are, right? Avidya is the knowledge of multiplicity. And Vidya is the knowledge of oneness, of unity consciousness. So why does it say that they go to darkness who pursue avidya? Means those who pursue multiplicity, those who live only in the world of matter, those who only are in this relational, material awareness, they go to darkness. This is understandable. But why do they go to greater darkness who follow knowledge? Because we need to understand the three Purushas that Gita speaks about to understand this Isha better. So we have a Kshara Purusha, that is soul in nature. And then we have an Akshara Purusha, the Atman. And when we seek knowledge or Vidya, this Atman is a universal Purusha, which is Samam Brahman. It has no multiplicity. We become one and we give up our ego. So we don't exist anymore and we completely are in inaction. We cannot act anymore because we are completely liberated. And if we pursue just that, then we go into greater darkness because we can never comprehensively master the world. We have left the world as it is. Okay? So, what the Gita proposes and what the Upanishads propose and what the Veda proposes is that beyond the Kshara and Akshara, Gita says, is the Uttama Purusha. The Uttama Purusha is the Purushottama. And it again and again, the whole of Gita after the 6th chapter, 12 chapters, Krishna is telling Arjuna that once you reach Akshara Purusha, don't just think this is the final aim. because you have to go higher. As long as you have found the Kshara Purusha, you are living in matter. But if you have found just your Akshara Purusha, then you've given up life and you disintegrate. When the ego is given up, within some weeks, the body just disintegrates. We cannot do work in the world. But to do work in the world, and that is what Isha Upanishad also says, that Jiji Vishet Shatam Samaha, let us wish to live 100 years and work. But that work should not be driven by personal desire, but it has to be work done for Lokasangraha, for bringing people together, for uplifting humanity. So this is the thing we are trying to resolve, that as long as we live in matter, we have karma, we are generating at every stage because we are acting through the ego. And the Gita says the ego has these three gunas of sattva, rajas and tamas, the prakriti. As long as we are acting through our prakriti, there is no liberation possible, because every act is creating another consequence. Now, liberation means, therefore, logically one would think that not to do this action, not to engage in this prakriti, in this matter. And that is what, for times immemorial, the rishis and sadhus have sought, nirvana. Nirvana is this Atman or Brahman, which Sri Aurobindo calls, or the self, S capital. It is the Akshara Purusha, which when you achieve, then you are no more in this gunas and prakriti. You have given up the prakriti, you are completely in the Purusha, in the Akshara Purusha, and you do not generate any karma, but you do not do any work either. So how do you combine these two? And there is no way out, and that's why there is Madhavacharya's Dvaita. But the Gita, and that is the Uttamam Rahasyam of the Gita, the supreme secret of the Gita is that beyond the Kshara and Akshara, there is an Uttama Purusha, there is a supreme person who combines both this personal and impersonal divine. And when you become that Uttama Purusha, then the Uttama Purusha's Prakriti is the Para Prakriti. So your nature grows beyond the gunas. From Prakriti, you assume the Para Prakriti. You become from the Prakriti through Maya to Shakti. You become, and that's when your action does not attach to you. You do not generate any karma after that. Therefore, the Gita says that we attain from the tamasic to the rajasic to sattvic state, because but even when we have reached sattvic, we are still in the gunas, we are still in the prakriti. But sattva is that lever that takes us beyond the gunas into the para prakriti, and that's when we are liberated from nature. So this is how you can combine matter and spirit. While being in this world, you can act in the world, but you will not attach karma to yourself, because it is not your prakriti driven by desire and ego and attachment that is working through the three gunas, but it is the para prakriti, the supreme will, that is getting executed through you. So this is how, philosophically, at the age of 16, I started thinking, and by 21, I had resolved in my mind that this is how you can combine matter and spirit. But then what do you do with all this theory? It's quite a mouthful in any case. And when you start living it, it's all the more, challenging. But then that's the beauty of it, that nobody can take it away from you. You can do it all the time. She was mentioning in the morning, it's 24 hours, 365 days. You can do it all the time. Nobody can take it away from you. Not even they could take it away from Sri Aurobindo when he was in Alipur jail, when he was in that 4x6 cubicle without a window. That's where he had the experience of Krishna, the immanent divine in everything. So, and you can do it all the time. Nobody can take it away from you, and it is your own inner journey, and nobody needs to know a thing about it. Because outwardly you are doing all those things you were doing before, It's just that inwardly the pivot has changed. Something has changed. And that's when, what Nilima was saying, I started this whole journey of trying out this application of spirit in matter. So, for instance, when I was growing up, you had to be good in either maths or in science or in literature, you know. You were considered weird if you are good at everything. And I even loved Hindi as a subject. I used to look forward to it, and sports and everything. Though I was not the best at it, any of it, because there were always somebody who was a number one runner. I would always finish third. There was always somebody in art who's first. I was second. There was somebody getting always 100 out of 100 in maths. I was getting 98 or 95. But I was interested in all of these things, and I didn't have anybody who was interested in all of these things. And till, as I said, 16, it was tough. But when I came to know of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, that how we have to develop each and every part of ourselves, then I became very confident about whoever I was. Maybe I was not like others, but it was okay because Sri Aurobindo approved of it. And that's how this, and then I came across Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, and he was also a dabbler like me, I thought. And as an 18-year-old, it was very reassuring that there was another somebody who studied anatomy for some years, and then science, and then art for a few others, and so on. And this journey continued, and the underlying thing was, how do you combine matter and spirit? For instance, why did I started studying Russian ballet at the age of 35. And that's when ballerinas retire. So when I went to Russia to learn, the teacher was furious that I had set up an appointment with her and wasted her time when she saw that I was 35. And she said, this is the age when ballerinas retire, and you're coming, you should have started at the age of 3. Then I said, but it's okay, in India we don't retire. I also learned Odissi dance, and my teacher was Kelucharan Mahapatra, and he was dancing till he was 80. I said, in India we dance till, we don't retire. Then she said, but you will never be able to dance in front of an audience. I said, but that's not why we dance in India. We dance for the divine, and we dance for ourselves. And I want to learn it for my own perfection. And that was something that touched her. When I said that I'm just going to learn for my own perfection, she took me on. And at 35, I started, and if we can just set up the presentation. So within a year, I went on to dancing on my point shoes. But the journey was not just going on point shoes, it was invoking the Divine Mother. It was, the mother has said that even when you walk up, you should be conscious of the muscles that are working. You can call the supramental force. For the first time, okay, going back to first Vedanta, that when the 4 Mahavakyas were talking about immortality of consciousness. There are, since times immemorial, humans have wanted to become immortal. So one of the ways they do it is by writing great pieces of literature or music like Mozart, Kalidasa, and so on. That's how they remain immortal. Or like Buddha and Ramana Maharshi, you are immortal in consciousness. You have attained that nirvana. But Sri Aurobindo, for the first time in the spiritual history of the world, he's talking about immortality of this very physical. So the Gita also leaves up to the sattva that becomes sattvic, then the Paraprakriti will handle it from there on. But it does not go beyond it if you just read the Gita. But in essays on the Gita, which Sri Aurobindo has explained, he says how this Prakriti, how it can be transformed into the Paraprakriti, the supramental body, which will have the qualities of plasticity, of lightness, of resilience, and so on. So this very body can become immortal, and that's something Sri Aurobindo has said for the first time. So for the first time, matter and spirit can unite in a way that in matter, spirit will be visible. And Mother says that it is not just those who are pursuing this supramentalization that can see each other. Even an ordinary person can see when a person is getting supramentalized. So this is the transformation that already 29th of February is here. And that is when in 1956, supramental was brought down on Earth's atmosphere. So I was talking to you about the first creation, how involution happens, and then the process of evolution starts. But at every stage, the entity does not have the required strength to evolve to the next level. So the divine comes down and helps it happen, and that is the concept of avatarhood. The avatars that come, and that is the concept of the 10 avatars, the story, Dashavatar. That how at each step the avatar comes, because the avatar has to establish that stair. It's almost like a stair needed where we can go up. So supramental layer has been set up and brought down physically into the Earth's atmosphere on 29th February 1956. And the golden lid, which is spoken of in the Isha Upanishad. In the Isha Upanishad, there is a golden lid which kind of does not allow that supramental light to come on Earth. And the rishis of the Vedantic rishis did not have access to supermind. They speak of three rochanas, the overmental planes they speak of, but not about supramental. But this golden lid, and that is the mother's picture when she is with the hammer breaking open that lid, and supramental light is ushered into this Earth atmosphere. And supermind is that entity which can truly combine matter and spirit in the physical. On one hand, it can hold Satchidananda, and on the other hand, mind, life, and body. It is that Turya, the fourth on either side, mind, life, body, life, mind, and supermind, Satchidananda and supermind. So the Turya, the fourth one, is supermind that can hold both of this matter and spirit together. This is a very interesting graph. You can see after the 1950s, the life expectancy has gone up. And the defining event that happened here was the supramental consciousness in 1956. So in very matter, now we have the possibility of becoming immortal. So the first signs will be youthfulness, and that is Auroville's motto also, a youth that never ages. And the second would be less and less of falling sick when we are open to that supramental force. And long life, you won't look your age, and one would live longer. That is the initial aspect. And then slowly, one achieves immortality, in this very body. So I was telling you that is how so this is me at the age of 40 on point shoes, after my teacher said after 35 you couldn't study ballet. And that's only possible, I think, because of supramental in Earth consciousness. Maybe she wasn't wrong, because the age she was used to was pre-supramental, And this is this is karate, again started at the age of 33, to demolish this idea that how women are weaker gender, and that one could learn self-defense, even being petite and small, and have that power and that strength. So this is another example of, can I play the video here? Yeah. So that is breaking off a tile with this hand and combining complementariness. So matter and spirit is complementary, but we can start by combining that complementariness in our daily lives. For instance, we don't have to typecast ourselves, like I'm a morning person or a night person. We can be any person. We have to have that. If we can get up at 3, if we have to catch a flight, we can study the whole night if we have to. We can sleep early if we need it to be. So the freedom from prakritis, Sattva Guna, and this thing is when you have mastered dualities in yourself. So here if you see, the hand needs to be very delicate in dance. you know. But the same hand can be very strong when you have to punch somebody. And you need not be a graceful dancer only or a very strong karateka. You can combine these. So one of the ways in which you combine matter and spirit is to combine dualities and to exceed them. And the dualities are generally in negatives, like generous and stingy and so on. But even the good dualities, one can transcend, like strength and grace are two dualities. We supposedly feel that one cannot exist with the other, right? Strength and grace. But if you see the concepts, the Devis, the Kali, for instance, or Durga, she is the epitome of grace and also strength. Even if we don't go to goddesses, if we look at Rani of Jhansi, for instance, the queens of India, they all studied the 64 kalas, the 64 art forms, which range from sword fighting to drawing on the floor. So a practical way of combining matter and spirit is to not be typecast. So not just we have to go beyond the three gunas of sattva, rajas and tamas, we have to also combine the four varnas. So the four varnas, which later on was represented as the caste system, is not actually caste. It is a varna, which means temperament. And there are four of these, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. So Brahmin is a person with knowledge and spiritual enlightenment for seeking. Kshatriya is one that seeks honor and can stand up for cause bigger than himself or herself. Vaishya is mutuality and generation of wealth and this creating of beautiful life. And then Shudra is service. So these four are the Swadharma. Each one of us is born with one or more of these. So another way to combine matter and spirit is to become Chaturvarnya, to combine these four in our psyche. And the Divine Mother, which is your day 4 topic, is how the Divine Mother, the Aditi, in order to establish this cosmic universe, has to take on these four aspects of Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati. So these four correspond to Brahmin, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Knowledge, power, mutuality and service. So again, we don't have to be just one of these, though we may be born with one of these, because that's the lever necessary. And Gita says that to be able to do work in the world and to grow from this Prakriti to Para Prakriti, one has to use the lever of Swadharma. It's only whatever we can do naturally, through that we can grow. But eventually, we have to learn to become all these four. And these are the ideas that we are trying to. I'll talk to you about an experiment we are doing in Ladakh of setting up of this university where we are trying to combine matter and spirit. Okay, so this is the picture I took of the university from the aircraft in 2017 when I was told that this is where the university is going to come up. So Ladakh, as you know, is an high altitude cold desert. When I left yesterday, it was minus 18, felt like minus 24, and it was snowing, and that's how my flight got cancelled the day before. And I landed at plus 30, so almost 50-degree, transition. So here, as you can see, not a blade of grass, not a drop of water. And to set up a university in these conditions was tough. Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh. It's a university we are trying to set up. And a lot of our friends who visit from Auroville, they say that it reminds them of Auroville. And that has been the dream. As you know, Mother wanted to set up the ashram in the mountains, but she conceded to Sri Aurobindo's wish of setting it up next to the ocean. So I was thinking, why not, try a similar thing in the mountains as per the mother's wish. So this is, just as she says, Auroville is a university without walls, where youth never ages, where you combine matter and spirit, you express spirit in matter. And so that's what we are trying to do with the university there. And this was something that we set up 30 years ago as a school, which was a similar landscape. And that's what gave us confidence that if we could set up this school 30 years ago, why not a university in the same terrain? And we called all the partners or stakeholders, students, the villagers and architects and civil engineers, and asked them to visualize a space, that how this would turn out to be. And this got the first prize because it had the audacity to think of so much of greenery and water. So then we conceived of a master plan. Predominantly, Ladakh is a Buddhist place, so you have to respect the sentiments of the locals. So there's a concept. Another thing of combining matter and spirit is to try to get to the essence of everything and connect the dots. That's what Sri Aurobindo did when he synthesized all the philosophies into integral yoga. That's the mind we have to develop. The higher mind can see all the specialities, all the varied subjects, and kind of have a larger idea around which you can connect it. Though I came from Sri Aurobindo's background, but that place was predominantly Buddhism. So I studied Vajrayana Buddhism, which is very similar to integral yoga. It is the most advanced form of Buddhism, the Vajrayana Buddhism, that combines matter and spirit. And we came up with this master plan, and the Upekha path is a journey from matter to spirit. So the 9 schools that we have envisaged are, the first one is School of Architecture, Eco-Responsive Architecture. That is absolutely material. But how do you make a spiritual building, right? I don't know how many of you have seen Golkond in Pondicherry. So it is a expression of mother's spirituality in matter. Everything in that building is conscious. Even the limestones that are there have fossils in them, and the whole orientation, the materiality. It is 5 degrees lower than outside, the temperature. As is the Matri Mandir here, which you have all visited. There were people from the whole world struggling to come up with the structure of Matri Mandir. And mother closed her eyes and then she drew a circle and 4 pillars. And that's how the master plan evolved of this. So even a building can be an expression of spirituality. It is because whatever is the level of consciousness of the architect or of the visionary, that is what comes down into matter. And at every day, we are actually combining spirit and matter, because nothing is not spirit, right? If that supreme has become all of this, so all the planes and parts of the being, everything is Brahman. Wherever we are also Brahman in whatever impartial state we are in right now. And whatever we are doing in our daily life, we are expressing that Brahman, but subject to the impurities of ego, desire, attachment. So all that we do is an expression of spirit. It is how pure that expression is. And the more we purify ourselves, the more it comes out in our action. Even as a homemaker, one can be a very spiritual, one can bring a lot of spirituality into the way the house is arranged, into the way the food is cooked. There is an art and science of everything, of clothes that one wears, So even as a sweeper, if one is of that higher consciousness, you can bring that into your sweeping even. And you may be the prime minister of a country, but if you're driven by ego, desire, and attachment, then you bring that into your work. So work is immaterial. Each one of us here can combine the matter and spirit and aspire to do it by refining and purifying ourselves more and more. So this Upekha path starts from School of Eco-Responsive Architecture, which is absolute materiality. Then the next school is School of Energy Studies. So how to make these buildings energy efficient. Then we have School of Ecology that brings water and other energies into it, and School of Tourism, responsible tourism, because culture and how you share your highest with others. Then you move up, there is School of Experiential Education, which moves on slowly to higher mental and higher vital and mental. And you have School of Design, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Then you have School of Leadership, Social and Political Leadership, which is your higher, mind, your Kshatriyahood. And finally is the School of Transformative Spirituality. So the whole master plan also goes from matter to spirit. And there are several things we are trying to do here. And I'll just touch upon this School of Experiential Education. Again, how you can bring into design your highest idea, right? So this is a infographic that I came up with, which kind of summarizes the whole education that we'll be following, that the child is at the center, and the child is a flower that has to be nourished, not like a metal that has to be hammered, as the mother says, into shape. Today's education tries to think of a child as a piece of matter which has to be hammered into an engineer or doctor. But we visualize the child as a flower. You cannot make a flower happen, right, of a particular color, of particular size. All we can do as gardeners is to create the ecosystem, to give it the best, earth, sunlight, water, and so on. So as teachers, facilitators, and parents and educators, we can only create a good ecosystem and allow the child to flower. And from the Vedanta, from the Upanishads, we have the three aspects of Adhibhuta, Adhidhaiva, and Adhyatma. These are three aspects. Adhibhuta is the material consciousness, matter, right? Matter, Adhibhuta means all that the senses can perceive. So that is the knowledge of nature. The knowledge of nature, nature that God has created, is Adhibhuta, the material world around us. And that we can learn through natural world and how the world works. And it can be done only through contextual education, and that gives rise to material freedom. You know that in India, most of the villages are being abandoned by the villagers and they're moving to cities. And I see that's also happening in countries like Spain, etc. That's because even though the villagers are very rich in a lot of livelihood opportunities and minerals, but the education is not empowering them to take, to take advantage of that context and to do something meaningful. And olden India was absolutely self-reliant because every village was self-sufficient for 80% of their staple needs. All the food that they ate, they grew themselves, the clothes, etc. So there was no breakdown of global supply chains as it happened during COVID. Most of America and Europe that is dependent on outside to get their basic needs also, like food, it broke down. Even right now with Ukraine war, there is something called the energy crisis happening in UK because they're importing energy. Whereas Indian system was local self-sufficiency. And that's what happens when the material world has been mastered through contextual education and we are materially free. Then we have Adhidaiva. Adhidaiva is the non-material forces within us, which are our emotional and mental faculties. And that is our relational world. a relation with each other, the knowledge of society. And that can be enhanced through all the man-made world and ideas that change the world. Our judiciary, our constitution, our educational systems, everything that man has created. And that happens through higher order thinking when we develop, intuitive ways of thinking and deeper ways of feeling. And that gives us social transformation, because contextually you may be very rich, let's say in a place like Afghanistan, but if you're surrounded by Taliban and there is no social transformation, then you cannot have a fulfilled life. So from material freedom, we move to social transformation. And finally, Adhyatma is spirituality, knowledge of oneself. That is inculcated through who am I and how do I express myself. And that happens through experiential education, when we engage and through lived experience, immerse ourselves. And that gives rise to personal transformation. Because you may have material freedom and a great social structure like the Scandinavia has, but also it has very high suicide rates, for instance, because maybe the component of personal transformation and spirituality is missing. And this is how you also combine matter through matter and spirit. And this is the kindergarten, this is the infographic I came up with, which would be on display at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London as Pedagogy of the Future, as a permanent exhibit. And the school, this is what we follow in our university. And also I'm developing a school, a kindergarten to 12th school around this. And I asked the architects and I worked with them that the structure of the school should represent this, and they came up with that structure like that. It's an infinite learning loop, because learning is spiral. It never ends, but you come back to the same idea of who am I after 10 years, but in a deeper way. Then you keep coming back to that. So that infinite loop here. And this is how, this is the architectural drawing. It will be done like this. And a lot of features are built into it. Like for children who are hardly 2 feet tall, the world is a very scary place, The adults are big and everything is big. So if they can get onto something, they are not scared of it anymore. So the school is designed in a way that they can just go up on the school. They are like over the school. And it is seamless. There is no classrooms. This is the architectural drawing, but the foundation has already started, is already completed. It will be launched next year, 25th. Next year it will be starting. Yes, in Ladakh. So the child can from here run up on the school and be back. And then there is a seamless inner and outer learning. So it's not like classroom based. Like for instance, how the world works, which is all physics. That area will open up to a gym where through motion they will learn momentum and all of that. Similarly, natural world will open up to a geodesic dome, which will have all the plants in it. So they just walk out into that space to learn it and so on. This is how it will look. This was an attempt to share how some experiments at a personal level through dance and karate and through architecture, through anything you do, you can combine this. And the mother says that once you are on this journey, you cannot not choose everything which is leading you to that. So when guests would come, they would bring a lot of things and she would ask the kids to choose. So there would be chocolates and turtles and those metal turtles and so on. And most of the kids would choose chocolate. And then she would say, don't you remember that turtle represents immortality? So even your choice of your gift has to be aligned with what you want to be in your future. So if immortality is what you're seeking, then you should have chosen the turtle, because every choice that we have has to be that ideal. who am I? We can never truly know as of today, because the anatomy and physiology of who I am, my physical, I study in medicine. My psychology, I study in the arts. My mind, I study in sciences. My history, I study in another subject, and philosophy of life, I study in some other, division. So, for the last 400-500 years, we have made too many specializations, and therefore we cannot know the overarching picture of anything. So that's why modern medicine does not recognize psychology as also, affecting your health or your neuroscience, etc. So this who am I will combine all these anatomy and physiology, psychology, neurology, history, philosophy. So it will combine all of this so that from kindergarten till 12th, there'll be a cascading curriculum that through all of this you find out who you are. So there won't be subjects. These would be the 6 themes, and it would be integrated subjects. Like, for instance, to know the natural world, we have botany and zoology and all of that separately. But here, the kids will take up an ecosystem and learn everything about it, from geology to climatology to archaeology, to understand that natural habitat.
Impressive.
Thank you.
It looks like Mars.
Yes.
Maybe this could be the first school that we build in Mars, right?
You are right, and if you understood Hindi, there's a joke we tell about Ladakh. I'll translate it. So generally we say in India, jungle mein mangal, means you create something fantastic in a forest. So jungle and mangal. But mangal has a pun. Mangal is also Mars. So we say mangal pe jungle for Ladakh and our work. It's like Mars. It's called, there are parts of it which are called moonland. They're exactly like how you have the landscape on moon.
I love it. This reminds me a bit of the project that is going on in Tabuk in Saudi Arabia. They are building a whole city. It's a line. It's a line of 175 kilometers. And they are building it now. I was there a few weeks ago. So it looks like Mars as well. But anyway, I would love to ask you, because in our foundation, the World Happiness Foundation, we have a whole program called Schools of Happiness. And we connect self with community and planet. So actually, the 3 elements that you have, but you went beyond, because you went really into the supramental space. And the question is, the inspiration for your whole model is based on basically Aurobindo's philosophy and Indian scriptures. What else is there in the
So I'm a student of philosophy and science, and as I told you, I dabbled into everything. So it is, and I've traveled also. Last year I was also lecturing and at Oxford, Cambridge, etc. And I have tried to assimilate the best from everywhere, but predominantly the best and the most futuristic is Mother and Sri Aurobindo in the world today. The only difference is that while Sri Aurobindo has written more than 30 books and he has initiated us into every aspect, like social, political, technological, but he has left it to us to execute it and, in detail. That's how you combine spirit and matter, he has. So for that, Sri Aurobindo himself was an example of how he was a world citizen, right? Even in his writings, he brings in Plato, Socrates, and everybody. Mother herself was influenced by artists and musicians. So that's the other bridging of East and West, which Rudyard Kipling said they can never meet. But his own mother was, I think, an Indian, and he grew up in India, being a Westerner, Kipling himself. So they have actually met, East and West, which is predominantly spirit and matter in terms of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And it's very interesting, and this is an idea I have, that Normally, when we spoke of avatars who come to hasten the process and enable the next stage, it is always Vishnu who comes with his consort, you know. But this is for the first time, Sri Aurobindo and Mother have come. Mother is Shakti, you know, she is the Shiva and Shakti consciousness, and Sri Aurobindo is Vishnu's consciousness. So for the first time, it's like Vishnu and Shiva have come together, because Vishnu is this consciousness, you know, the psychic being, the Purusha. But Shiva stands for transformation of matter. And that's why the mother, the Shakti. So for the first time, this evolution is going to actually bring a change in the way spirit affects matter.
So inspiring. I guess that you know the Waldorf system, the Waldorf school system with Rudolf Steiner.
Yes, Waldorf, Steiner.
Because
Steiner.
the seed element of the child is the beginning, as you said that.
Exactly.
So I think it's beautiful what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question in this journey of moving from spirit to matter and integrating spirit and matter. Do we have to go through a period of being fully in the Purusha, the silence? You know, even Krishna tells Arjuna that
Very interesting
there
question.
is first the Akshara Purusha and then the Uttama Purusha. So I sometimes wonder in my own path, do I need to be in silence for some time and then come back and attempt the integration with matter and working with the world? Or is it okay to begin straight with the Uttara? I don't know.
Yeah, so when Arjuna is asked to do this war, the first 6 chapters of the Gita is Karma Yoga. So the first 6 chapters is the awakening of the Kshara Purusha, the psychic being. And that happens best in action, in work, in Karma Yoga, through remember and offer and equanimity, the practice of these two. So the foundation of yoga is equanimity and remember and offer. And even if you go to a cave and sit there and do, you have the impression or illusion of having mastered yourself. But the moment you come to life and you start dealing with others, then you know that how a lot of things have not been purified. So world is the best place where everything is a mirror of who we are within. You know, our relationships, things which upset us during the day, and situations we come across that are insurmountable, always point to an inner tweaking, and that is Karma Yoga, and that is the best. Once a semblance of equanimity and remember and offer has been established, equanimity, then the next 6 chapters is Dhyana Yoga, where automatically you would want to spend some time alone, and the percentage of action and meditation or deep study will change. You would want to do more of meditation and deep study, because the Akshara Purusha is now getting activated. And then the final thing again, Karma Yoga will come back, but not just with this equanimity alone, but with lot of love and adoration and devotion in the heart. The love element will also awaken, not just for the Supreme, but for everybody around. So that's how, whatever little from my experience and from the study of the Gita.
Thank you so much.
And another thing before you ask, something very beautiful which Gita tells about matter and spirit, Purusha and Prakriti, is that both are eternal and endless. Matter also has no beginning and no end. There is a shloka, I forget which chapter, but both Purusha and Prakriti, matter and spirit, are eternal. They were always there, they'll always be there. But it's our relationship with it that will change. For instance, when a dog looks at a pile of coal, all it can see is a place where it can just go and relieve itself, right? It cannot. But when human being looks at coal, the same matter reveals to it that there is energy in it. A dog cannot see energy in coal, but the coal is the same. So when from man we become supramental, we will see that divinity in that coal. we'll see another dimension of that, which the dog could not see, which we could see in terms of energy. So that's how the perception of, there is a, Arjuna asks, and Krishna also says that when we give up these gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, how does our prakriti change? So there is an actual physical change that comes in us, and the perception of the physical reality changes for us. Like in Vipassana, they say people who are perfected, they experience bhanga. Bhanga means they can see the dissolution and coming of everything here. That's how the reality is perceived. And we have the sukshma, the subtle senses, the subtle eyes, subtle. So the Kena Upanishad says that these senses cannot reach that. It is that which activates these senses. Like the whole fallacy of modern science to prove God is that you cannot, by the very means that you employ, because through the mind and through the senses, the mind and the senses cannot reach that. But they are working because of that. But when from Prakriti we move to Paraprakriti, are these senses also, like there are this third eye opens, which is that intuitive sight, and ears, we hear things. And we have examples of that, like Mozart could hear. Amal Kiran told me that his poetry, Amal Kiran is K.D. Setna, he was a senior sadhak here in the ashram, and I was very fortunate to enjoy a very close relationship with him. So there was a period in his time when he wrote overmental poetry. So just below the supramental is overmental, overhead poetry. He used to joke though that overhead poetry is that goes over your head. But he was saying that when he was writing that poetry, he would be asleep and he would just get up and there would be lines of poetry coming down in his vision, and he would just write it and then go back to sleep again and then see it and come and write it and so on. So our inner, these very physical faculties of seeing, eyes, they become more and more sukshma, subtle, when we grow in evolution. Yes.
Just a short question. You said that one of the buildings is experimental studying. Is that what you mean, or is
Yes.
it for? Do you have it for adults too?
So the 9 schools which I spoke about, the 5th one is called the School of Experiential Education. That is a school. Because it's a university, it's all postgraduate programs. But we also have a kindergarten to 12th school here. Because the Teacher Training Institute attached to it is a postgraduate teacher training institute.
But not what we call outdoor training or stuff like that, working in the mountains, or not that?
Yes. We have 30% is only classroom and all, 70% is outdoors.
The scientific evolution looks quite confusing because, at one end we say that the older people were better, they lived longer, and they had better senses. The way they lived was better than what we are doing now. So that is the evolution. The scientific says now we are more evolved because our mind is working more. And there's the another evolution which the Kriya Yoga tells about. When you do pranic practices and all that, then you have subtler senses and you start experiencing, like your thought also broadens and all that. So what a paradox you think about these two kind of evolution, and which we should go with. Right?
Yeah. I think they kind of complement each other. Like there's a lot of fear now about AI, artificial intelligence. But I think it's a good thing that if something that machines can do, human beings need not do, because they need not dehumanize themselves, right? So it is also a pointer to how human beings should grow, therefore. If machines have become as smart as you, then what are the hidden faculties that point to our evolution that we should develop? And Kriya Yoga is precisely that. So for instance, beyond the logical mind, we have several layers which Sri Aurobindo has spoken about: the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind, and supermind. So it's the evolution, the scientific evolution is pointing to humans to evolve. and do things which machines cannot do, like higher mind and intuitive mind. Intuit, the capacity to intuit is not something which machines can do. And for long, we are stuck in logical mind. So we have to develop the higher stages of the mind. Then another thing which machines cannot do is to empathize, feel. So that again points to deeper order feeling that we have to develop, which we haven't for the past many centuries. We are so isolated. So oneness, feeling of oneness and all of that, which every human can develop in herself. That's something machines can never do. And if they are going to write an essay for you, which by, collating from everywhere, let them. But it's time now that we start living those essays. A chat GPT can tell you what is psychicization in Sri Aurobindo's context, but it cannot psychicize. But we can psychicize. So we had been too much living a life of the outside. So machines are taking that up and telling you that it's time that you start looking inward into your subjective world, what we started with spirit. And I think machines will take a long time to be spiritual. So that's some job human beings can do better.
That was incredibly inspiring.
Thank you.
And it's really interesting for me because it almost takes the pressure off because there's so many things that I think needs to evolve, and sometimes I think get panicked, such as a new university, such as new schooling, and I feel disconnected from what's going on. So you've just connected me back in, and I feel a sense of relief in lots of ways. So thank you. COVID was interesting for me because I lost all my work and then deeply immersed myself in the nature around me, and for the first time ever. And this one word keeps swooshing up from the ground, communities. And it occurred to me I didn't know anyone in my community. I was flying all over the place. I didn't know my neighbours. Community. And that grounded me. It was the highest, I suppose, the message of the highest order. And that's what I've been doing, is building communities based on values, conservation or affordable housing or whatever. And I guess just doing that exercise again makes me just double down on that. I honestly believe that connecting back into these communities where we can be self-sufficient and we can look after each other and love each other, because where I am, it's so isolating. Everyone is so isolated where I am.
One way of having the pressure off oneself is to remember what Krishna says in the Gita, and I'll end with that. That he says that past, present and future are all in me. And that's your theme for tomorrow, past, present. So Krishna says that all that has happened, all that is happening and all that will happen is already in me. So I'm not expecting from you anything. Only that when you do your work, remember me. And do it mat bhava, as I would do it. And we don't have to be under the pressure that, I'm not under any pressure that I have to set up this university. I'll just get up and for the number of years I can do, I'll do it, and then somebody will take it after that. Because the past, present and future are all in Krishna. He's figured it out, who will do and how.